Hi, baby boomer fans. We are Jackie and Janine, the Pfeiffer sisters, and love to talk about the 1950s, inviting you to reminisce with us as we explore experiences of that decade.
We chronicled the distinct memories of our childhood in our book, While the Windmill Watched, a slice of rural America in the 1950s, which takes you on a notably historic journey through that often forgotten decade. We also want to hear about your experiences during the 1950s. We will feature guests whose special stories of that decade will bring to mind magical moments of reflection, some with tears, some with smiles, but above all, a good dose of laughter.
We would like you to chat with us as we bring to mind the sights and sounds so familiar to that time in history. Grab your favorite malt or Green River. Make sure you are wide awake and get ready to be inspired about the 1950s. Welcome to the 1950s Fun Chat. Hello, friends, relatives, patriots, lovers of the 1950s Fun Chat, and especially those of you who have had the opportunity to read our book, While the Windmill Watched, a slice of rural America in the 1950s, that it will be made into a movie. It's starting with the script. The screenplay is being written now as we speak, and so stay tuned, everybody, because we will keep you updated on the progress of the movie. But right now, let's focus on the Fun Chat, Jackie. Lead us into it, please.
Okay, just a couple of things I'd like to make note of, and that is the purple banner at the bottom of your screen. It is running across the bottom, and it has our website, www.whilethewindmillwatch.com. Excuse me. There you'll find all information about the book, about the authors, about the events that we will be visiting, about the 1950s Fun Chat. And all of the recordings previous to this, it's been about a year and 4 months or something like that we've been doing this. So we have quite a few interesting recordings on there. Mm-hmm. Up in the upper right-hand corner, you'll see the book. And on the cover is a beautiful North Dakota sunset that wraps around the cover. And at the lower right-hand corner, you'll note that little white spot. Well, the little white spot indicates something that very important that happened to our little book last year, because it now has the 2022 National Independent Press Award in the regional nonfiction category for as a distinguished favorite. So that's why that little dot is there, that you can't see it. The book was published in 21. This came in 22, and we're in 23, and we're looking. And now the movie.
Yes.
What's next?
Anyway, I don't know. It'll be interesting to find out.
Right. So we are very blessed to have had these notoriety. On with the show, though, where I'm going to introduce you to Rebecca Baker. Rebecca arrived in the world in 1949 in Columbia, Missouri, where she was raised with two older brothers. She attended the University of Missouri for the first 3 years of college. As a senior, she transferred to the State University of New York at Albany, where she earned a BA with a major in psychology. She paused in her official education for a year to work, and then went to law school at the University of California, Berkeley, earning her Juris Doctorate in 1975. With her latest degree in hand, she moved to Seattle, Washington, where she worked and married for the first time. She divorced and had no children by that husband, but received a wonderful stepdaughter on the deal, with whom she still has regular contact. She remarried in Republic, Washington in 1986, but was widowed in 2015. There were no children from that marriage either. Rebecca has been a permanent resident of Florida since 2020. She and her second husband, Joe, had been snowbirds since 2011. The year she retired as judge after an overall of 35 years working in the field of law in the state of Washington. So, Rebecca, welcome to the 1950s Fun Chat.
Yeah. Thank you. It's a privilege to be here.
Thank you. Well, we'll get on with the show here, as I say. Rebecca, in the information you shared with us, you noted lifelong positive benefits from 3 unrelated sources. Let's begin with the first one. contracting polio at the age of 6 months. Tell us about that, please.
Well, I understood from my parents that they really didn't know what had happened until I didn't walk on time. This was at the tail end of the big polio epidemic in the United States, and before the vaccine was developed. And I was not able to walk on time. And so they began to try to seek help for that. My uncle was a general practitioner, family doctor, and he had a good friend who was an orthopedist that he had met. They were war buddies, World War II buddies, and they had gone to medical school together in St. Louis at Washington University. And so he got my parents in touch with Dr. Stewart, and we went from there. My polio was actually diagnosed, I would say, by the orthopedic shoe man who was an orthotist from World War II also. And he said to my mother one day, this is the family lore, well, Martha Jane, I never knew Becky had polio. And my mother was aghast because she, of course, had no idea. And so she raised the point with Dr. Stewart, with whom they were already working. And he said, oh, well, yeah, maybe that is what it was.
Oh, well. Oh, cheaper.
So we went from there. I had 4 operations as a child. So as you can see, I had really good medical care, unlike a lot of polio survivors. And I had a very mild case of polio, although really over the years it didn't seem mild to me. It impacted my life a lot. Mostly not so much socially. I always had very good friends, and I was an otherwise outgoing person. So I had the benefit of lots of people who cared about me, and 2 older brothers who didn't cut me any slack. That helped.
That's good.
So I was treated very normally, and in today's parlance in education, I think we would call that, we would say that I was mainstreamed.
Yes.
There was an era when handicapped children or children with a disability were isolated from other children on the thought that they would feel better if they were associated only with their own kind. And I was completely involved in every normal classroom setting, including PE and all of that. And my parents, my orthopedist, my mother asked Dr. Stewart, well, should we get her into some sort of therapy, or what should we do? He said, just give her ballet lessons and swimming lessons.
Okay.
And that's what they did. And I think my ballet lessons started my lifelong interest in music, although my mother was musical and my grandmother was very musical, even though I didn't realize that a lot growing up. She didn't even own a piano when I knew her, but she had been a piano teacher, and I ended up with all of her piano music. So I know she was quite accomplished as a musician, and my mother made sure we were all introduced to music. So, but I think the main thing that got me hooked on music and my later involvement in music helped me psychologically, I think, deal with teenage angst having to do with body image and that sort of thing. but the ballet lessons were what started me into a lifelong love of music. So, and the swimming lessons were another area where I was able to gain a sense of competence and self-esteem because I turned out to be a pretty strong swimmer, and that was good advice on Dr. Stewart's part.
Rebecca, did you have friends who had polio too? Did you develop close friendships with people of your age?
No, I had no knowledge of anyone else having had polio. I take it back. Two people I discovered later had polio. One was my good friend Perry Offrank, that I was friends with in junior high, and the other that was a woman, Perry Offrank, but she had no visible effects from the polio, even though she had a diagnosis. The other person I later discovered had polio. I knew he was in a wheelchair, but I didn't know why. And he attended, I remember in particular, I think it was 3rd grade or possibly 5th grade, on a microphone in our classroom from home. Now, I don't know if that was because he was isolated from us or because the school that we went to didn't have wheelchair accessibility, which it didn't, or just what. But that was Jerry Case. And I did not discover that Jerry, with whom I went to school from at least the 3rd grade through 12th, and met and re-met at high school reunions in Columbia, Missouri. I didn't realize that he had polio, that was the reason that he was in a wheelchair until one of our high school reunions. I was talking to him. So that was interesting to me. Maybe it was a taboo subject for the adults around us, that they thought it would hurt our feelings. I don't know what, but
you shared that bond with him, so it was only natural to want to learn more about that.
Right. So,
were you able then to receive the liquid vaccine, that pink polio vaccine that was put into a sugar cube, and then that's how you became vaccinated for the disease?
Yes, I received every conceivable polio vaccine, I have received every conceivable polio vaccine available, and starting with shots. My middle brother, I have 2 brothers that are 3 and 6 years older. Had 3 brothers. My middle brother died in 2004, but that brother, Richard, was a member of the March of Dimes. He was a volunteer with the March of Dimes, and did fundraising, like little kids did back then, because his little sister, I guess it was because his little sister had polio. And we had the polio shots. I remember more than one shot. And I definitely remember the sugar cube vaccine. But the first vaccine was developed in 1954, is my understanding from the reading I've done. And I had polio in 1949, in the fall of 1949. And looking back on it, they think it was then because my mother said I was fussy. I was an infant and couldn't talk, of course. They didn't know there was any infantile paralysis, is the other name for polio. They didn't know anything was going on.
Did they ever give you a reason of how this came about? How did it come to your life so early?
Well, polio was transmitted by water. It's a waterborne virus. And so it is spread through ingesting. My understanding is it's spread through ingesting water that is not, not treated. And in our neighborhood, I lived in a home at the eastern end of University Avenue, which was surrounded by a neighborhood that was all homes developed in the 1950s, I think. It was called Cliff Drive, and over the cliff was the Hinkson Creek. And I remember later playing in that creek, or being warned about playing in that creek, because it was there were a lot of, as you know, in those days there was a lot of untreated sewage that would go into creek beds, and so I don't know how I would have been exposed to it, because I don't know that my parents would have taken us to a swimming hole or anything like that, although they would have taken us to lakes to swim in and to, introduce their baby to water and that sort of thing.
Right. Do you recall having any friends or neighbors who also had polio in that?
Just the two schoolmates. Nobody else. No, there was a girl across the street, Billie Jean Pringle, who had cerebral palsy, and that was the only other disabled child or adult that I remember growing up around.
Rebecca, can you tell us about the March of Dimes organization, please, and how it got started?
I would not be the best person to ask that. But my understanding is that it was a dime at a time donation. So children and other people would collect these dimes on these cardboard things where you insert the dime, and then you turn in your dimes, and those dimes would go to help children, especially with the later effects of polio, because polio hits your body and then does the damage to your central nervous system. It commonly hits either, or affects the kind that I had, this very common kind, either your one arm, one leg, or the more serious cases, people ended up in the iron lung because it affected their ability to breathe. So fortunately, I wasn't one of those children, but that's how the March of Dimes started, was to help children get access to medical care when they had the late effects of polio and couldn't afford it. I was lucky to have a family that attended to my medical needs, and had good insurance and so on. And I have felt very grateful for the interventions that I got as a child, the surgical interventions and the, like I say, the swimming lessons and the ballet lessons.
Have you been affected at all as an adult? Any later effects of the disease?
Oh, yes. I have not had a diagnosis of what's called post-polio syndrome, which many people have had. They would have contracted polio as a child, and 40, 50, sometimes 60 years later, they all of a sudden develop a fatigue syndrome. And they just all of a sudden can't cope with many of the activities that they used to be able to cope with. I have not received that diagnosis, but I have, because of my gait, I have had a limp all my life. What happens after 70 plus years, I'm 74 today, after 73 and a half years of walking with a limp, you develop back problems. Yes. But I had good interventions. As a child, I had corrective shoes and a brace at one point. I remember in kindergarten, or a little shoe with a brace on it. Later on, I just had lifts and that sort of thing. And P.S. the man that diagnosed my polio, that was the orthotist. He owned a company in my hometown, Central Brace Company, for a lot of years, and then his son Jerry Benedict took it over, and he ran it until he retired. But he still does my shoes because he's a good friend of my brother Richard's, and his older brother has written a wonderful memoir about growing up in the 50s in Columbia, Missouri. I'll have to send you that link.
Well, we might need to talk with that man.
Yes, his name is Norman Benedict. It's a great book. It really brings back a lot of memories.
So let's move on to that second one. The universal language of music often brings people together. And so beginning in the 1950s, tell us how music in your life has enriched you.
Okay, well, I remember sitting by my mother at the piano bench while she played music and sang with us. And then my older brothers started one at a time, started piano lessons. And then I started piano. I was always very curious about it. And I started piano lessons at the age of, I think it was age of 7. I remember it was second grade. And I took piano lessons from then until I graduated from high school. But I always liked, even after that, I liked to play piano. And during law school, I played piano duets after a night of studying with one of my housemates. We would play duets to unwind. And when I moved to Republic, Washington, I looked for a piano duet partner in Seattle when I lived there. You would have thought that I could locate somebody. Probably in this day and age, you could on Facebook or something. But I did not come up with a piano duet partner until I moved to Republic, Washington, a town in northeastern Washington of about 1,000 people, as Jackie knows. And there I met a man named Ron Bacon, who has become a lifelong friend. And I played piano duets with him off and on until he had a major stroke in the year 2000. And I lost my piano duet partner, but he plays better one-handed than most of us do two-handed. So, then after I got involved with piano, my older brothers, my oldest brother played trombone in the school band, and my middle brother played trumpet. And of course, neither of them, I say of course, but neither of them stuck with any of that. But I started to play clarinet in 5th grade. And I played all the way through. I majored in music for a year at the University of Missouri. And then, year and a half, some form of music or another. And then I switched majors and ended up with a degree in psychology. But I've always been grateful for one class in particular that I took in college, which involved sight singing. Jackie, you and I were in a chorus together in Colville or Kettle Falls, Washington. And the things that I learned in that music theory course that required us to sing notes by sight were a lifelong source of enjoyment for me, being able to look at a page of music and imagine how it sounds generally. I'm not, by any means as proficient as, lots and lots of people. But so now in my present life, because of my early family emphasis on music, I'm taking piano lessons now.
Bravo.
And I have a music school scheduled in Italy this summer.
cool.
Clarinet teacher is on the faculty of, and so I'll be over there. And so I've been taking off and on clarinet lessons as well.
Mm-hmm.
And so are you in an orchestra now where you live in Florida?
I'm in a concert band, and I play in a trio with two other women. So yes, we have another concert tomorrow at an outdoor venue, our band, and
cool.
I get a lot of social enjoyment out of all of that too. It's just great. The people are so nice and fun, and
keeps your brain active and your fingers too.
Yes, I think it's good for cognitive, maintenance of cognitive abilities and manual dexterity and all that. Yeah.
Rebecca, do you have a favorite composer?
Well, I would say probably to listen to.
Okay.
It's probably Brahms. To play, it's probably Chopin, although many of his pieces are out of reach for me. So I instead of playing Chopin's nocturnes, I play a John Field nocturne is what I'm working on now. And he is the developer of the nocturne, and Chopin, he was a piano, sorry to hold forth on this, but he was a piano repair person and performer from Ireland who was working in Paris, and Chopin heard him play one of his nocturnes, and he fell in love with the musical form for the piano solo form. And so I can play one John Field nocturne now. I haven't advanced to a Chopin. I've played other things by Chopin, but yeah.
John Field. Okay.
Do you play popular music at all? Or are you more into the classical?
Oh man, I used to just, my mother had all this old 1940s music, 1930s and 40s sheet music. So I used to play that a lot. But in addition, she got me all sorts of contemporary stuff because I don't know if it was because her mother looked down her nose at that kind of thing, and she didn't, and she wanted to be a modern mother. I know my mother had that value system. But yes, I played a lot of that kind of music on the piano as a kid, and to lots and lots of LPs and
Rebecca?
Are we there? Okay.
There we go. Okay.
There we are.
Tapes that were, audio tapes that were contemporary, popular music. I've really kind of become a so-called classical music nerd now. I'm now actually at the age of 60, I think it was, maybe 65. I started to become an opera nut.
Yes.
So now my big thing is opera. And I love seeing opera. And, my mother always said, well, music is not all about the performers. They need an audience, and they need patrons. And she said, when I am in my dotage, I want to be a patroness. I want to be a benefactress. And I've always remembered that.
Yeah.
Will you be seeing any operas when you're in Italy?
Oh, yes, if I can help it. Yeah, I certainly will. Yeah, I've already been to Milan and to 3 La Scala performances. So, but I wouldn't mind seeing some more. And I think I'll probably have an opportunity to do that.
Yeah. Good. Are you going to Milan again?
Yes, I'll be flying into Milan because the school that I'm going to be going to is close to there. Yeah.
Okay. So the next of your 3, the Girl Scout program. And you probably know that it was originally called Girl Guides. It had benefited girls since 1912. The program emphasizes inclusiveness, the outdoors, self-reliance, and service. So how did these points affect you personally?
Well, it's impossible to say how influential Girl Scouting was to me growing up. First of all, it was a haven for me as a teenager. When you have that teenage angst about fitting in, it was someplace I always fit in, and I could exercise my leadership abilities and be appreciated and develop a sense of competence. So when I was younger, I started with brownies. And I have to thank my mother for this. She was a devoted stay-at-home mom at the time who volunteered to be my brother's Cub Scout.
Rebecca.
There we go.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Okay.
Yeah, my mother volunteered to be my brother's Cub Scout den mother. And she also volunteered to be our Girl Scout leader at various stages. And I realize in looking back on it how time consuming and what a wonderful thing that was, that the mothers that volunteered to help us, that was a real gift to all of us, because it took a lot of planning. But Girl Scouting, I look back and I just spent 3 nights in the home of my neighbor, across the street neighbor, Girl Scout friend, and she and I were in band together at my high school, my 55th high school reunion. I stayed with her, and Girl Scouting was a big thing for her. She had 2 daughters. It was a big thing for them. And of course, she volunteered to be their leader. And it was a lifelong influence. I think anyone who has ever been in Girl Scouting will say that. I mean, stayed involved anyway. I learned so many things. I was sort of, I think the program is set up like this. You're motivated to get that badge.
Sure.
And so you, or that pin. And so you have to go through certain steps in order to develop that particular competency. And so it introduced me to, I always think of Girl Scouts and my friend, Mary Dorsey Bass's grandmother, who taught us how to darn a sock.
Yes.
So we could get our sewing badge.
Yes.
And that kind of thing. We had many a backyard tenting experience in the neighborhood because of our Girl Scout emphasis on camping. And I had a friend, the friend that just came through with her husband through Florida. She and I met in Girl Scouts. She was from the next town over, 50 miles away. And we met at Girl Scout camp. And we've been friends ever since, and sorority sisters later on. So
Cool. Is there such a thing as a badge, a salesman badge for selling within a largest number of Girl Scout cookies?
I remember really working hard at selling cookies. I don't think we got prizes. No, we didn't get prizes in those days except for maybe bragging rights, but we had kind of a quota that we were expected. And I just only vaguely realized that the proceeds helped the troop leaders have the supplies to come up with creative and engaging programs for us.
So did some of that money stay locally in your troop and then some of the money went to the organization?
You tell me. I was a kid, so I don't know what. We just sold the boxes and turned in our money. Okay. And it did have to match up.
Sure.
So
Well, do you
I
drink
was
a lot?
also a good consumer of, in particular, the Thin Mints and the
Ah,
Savannas. I loved the
Yeah.
Savannas. Still do, but
So the Boy Scout, we don't, Janine and I were in 4-H, so we really don't know anything about Girl Scouts, but we do know that boys have Eagle Scout. What is the equivalent for girls, and what was that project like?
there wasn't an equivalent, but there was, I remember this, that there was a God and country of honor that you could earn. That was as a Boy Scout. And my next older brother was big in Boy Scouts, and he got his Eagle Scout badge or whatever it's called. But he also got his God and Country Award because he worked with our church in order to learn about various things having to do with our denomination and religion and so on. And so the Girl Scouts had an equivalent award for that, which was called the God and Community Award. And so I, of course, had to earn that because I was one of these kids that had perfect attendance in Sunday school.
Yeah.
So I wanted, everything to do with church. I was involved with it.
Yeah. Sounds as though throughout your life you've just been driven, no matter what the area.
Yeah.
I think that's a good. I would have to admit that. I think that going back to the first subject, that is something that polio survivors, they call us, have always or have often, most often, developed is this sense of needing to overachieve, to prove we're not inadequate.
Yes.
So that's been a driving force for me, the fact that I needed to overcompensate for some physical limitation by proving I was great at I'm trying to prove I was the best at certain other activities.
Yes, makes sense.
Okay.
Rebecca, we're nearing the end of our broadcast. I'd like to ask each guest a couple questions. If you can recall off the top of your head, what was a fun memory of the 50s?
Oh boy, I would have to say, dwelling on the last issue was Girl Scout camp.
Okay.
It was, I have so many memories, but sitting by a campfire and singing with a group of other scouts and the leaders in the twilight or in the nighttime with that fire crackling.
Okay. And then what from the 50s imprinted on you to help develop your character as an adult?
Wow. I think certainly Girl Scouting coupled with the family life that I had, their emphasis, my parents' emphasis, my grandmother's influence and her emphasis on education and reading. There are so many pictures of us, of my brothers, my cousins, and I sitting on or around or draped over my paternal grandmother while she's reading to us. And,
cool.
and so we got things that other kids don't get. We got an emphasis on education and expanding your mind.
Yes.
And both my parents were so supportive of all three of us.
Great. Yep, that's wonderful. Viewers, we have been visiting today with Rebecca Baker, who grew up in Columbia, Missouri. Then in her adult life, lived many different places, but settled more in Republic, Washington, and now lives in Florida as a retired young lady, I might say. Rebecca, thank you so much for joining us today. It's been great learning your story of the 1950s.
Mm-hmm.
And so while we conclude our program of today, remember, we will be back next week with another fun chat, another guest who either lived during the 1950s or whose life has been influenced by someone who did live during that decade. Jackie, can you close the program for us, please?
Yes, but I would like to remind people that just go to our website and click on the 1950s Fun Chat, and you'll be able to view many 80 plus or so that we've recorded, and very interesting people, because everyone is interesting. Everyone has, we don't have no two of us are alike. We've all had different experiences in the 50s, and Janine and I have really benefited from hearing of those, and we want you to do the same thing. So also, please look at the red subscribe button and push that. Also, the blue thumbs up button. We'd like to have you do that as well. And so, tell your friends, even your family, about the 1950s Fun Chat. So until next time, toodaloo.
Bye-bye.